Welcome to Hardcover Feedback. I'm Kelly Campos.
And I'm Brandy Smits. Today we have three amazing novels for you. The first one is a retelling of a classic Shakespeare favorite. We have a slacker fiction novel about a boy or man trying to find himself. And our third one is a multicultural chick lit.
First up, we have the reworking of Shakespeare's Hamlet. In Ophelia by Lisa Klein. This reworking of Shakespeare's Hamlet, Ophelia takes center stage. Ophelia is a wild girl, raised only by her father. She's accepted to join the ladies-in-waiting in the castle Elsinore, and soon she befriends Hamlet, the fascinating prince, and his friend Horatio. A spark ignites between Hamlet and Ophelia, and their secret love grows. Soon the palace is filled with murder and other horrid acts of impossible intrigue, and Ophelia is forced to choose between her own life and her love. Ophelia eventually develops a dangerous plan to help her escape Elsinore with a risky secret.
Well, how does my lady Ophelia? Said Horatio, bowing. Well, I thank you. I noticed that Horatio was now taller than the prince. His hair, still the color of afternoon sunlight on ripe wheat, fell on his shoulders, revealing a high and wide brow over his frank brown eyes. He had none of Hamlet's noble beauty, but a woman might find him somewhat fair of countenance. Hamlet then turned to greet me, though he did not try to take my hand. The wild doe has become a gentle deer, he said, showing that he had recognized my transformation. I dared to look at him. Indeed, my lord, this collar and chain do hold me fast, I said, touching the ruff and links of my chatelaine at my wrist, where my needle tools were suspended. I fear I have been forcibly tamed. She scored a hit, a palpable hit, Hamlet cried, and staggered as if pierced by a sword. Sharp as a rapier is this lady's wit. I laughed at this playful outburst, seeing in Hamlet the lively boy he once was. Christiana looked from me to Hamlet, suspicion flickering in her eyes.
First, I must admit, Hamlet is not my favorite Shakespearean story.
And I have to say that Hamlet is one of my favorite Shakespearean stories.
Ooh, we disagree. That's awesome.
I like when that happens.
But it's not my favorite only because it's a tragedy, and I get too emotional for the tragedies. I get too teary. And also because the character of Ophelia, which I'm typically drawn to the female characters, is so thinly drawn by Shakespeare. Even though he's known for having good women characters, all you see of her is this weepy person who's just around weeping and moaning, you know?
She's basically crazy.
Exactly.
All you know of Ophelia is, oh yeah, it's that crazy girl in Hamlet.
Right, exactly.
And there needs to be more, and that's what this novel gives to us.
Oh, it totally gives you more. It's not just a retelling of Hamlet. It's a new story that uses Hamlet as the backdrop. You do not have to know the story of Hamlet to enjoy this story. But if you do know it, you get a lot of the nuances. You really understand, oh, that's what was happening here, or oh, that's what was happening there. And it really feels like this is the real deal. This is what really happened behind the scenes. This is what was really going on while Hamlet was going nuts on his own. You know, that's really what this felt like to me.
I would love to have seen what Shakespeare and Lisa Klein could have done together, because
beautiful music.
This is the way it should have been. Like in the background, this is how Ophelia should have been. And I feel horrible because all these things that this is what it should have been, this is what should have been, and we can't tell you. We cannot tell you what happened, because it is so shocking of how she takes this character.
Yeah, and it's even more so than normal, because usually if we have a mystery or something, it's like, oh, we can't reveal the end, or, you know, but for this, most people kind of get the basic story. You know the idea of Hamlet, that his father was killed by his uncle, and then his uncle marries his mother. That all still happens. It's just that there's a whole castle, and this talks about everything else going on in the castle. And you know, the ladies in waiting, the behind the scenes cooks, and you know, whoever else is around. And Ophelia being the center of that world is what makes it so interesting, and how her life and her personality really are so strong and so interesting. And it's also a very interesting historically in terms of it. There's some things you learn about that time period that are true, that are just interestingly woven in to the story.
It goes more into detail. In Hamlet, it talks about the whole battle between, Denmark and then Fortinbras. I believe he was from France, I want to say.
I'm a little iffy, but
But
yes.
so it goes into that detail of what's going on politically, not just oh no, the king's dead. Oh, it's this whole vast explanation of why people are the way that they are.
Right.
And it was good, so good. I can't even put it into words. I loved it so much.
Right. Now, this is one of those novels that you will probably typically find in your YA or your teen section.
Yes.
But it's definitely a novel to go into that section for, even if you're an adult. It's
Definitely.
not a kid's book. Like I wouldn't necessarily give it to a fourth or fifth grader, not because there's anything objectionable, but they just might not get it.
They won't understand the Hamlet story well enough.
Exactly.
Because everyone's heard of it. I mean, even if you don't like it, you know basically what happens. And that's all you really need to know to enjoy this to the fullest.
Exactly. And
So-
so all in all, I give this book 4 stars. It was very good, very entertaining, very well written. It made me want to read the sequel to Ophelia's life, which doesn't always happen.
I have to agree with it. It was amazing. I gave it 3.5 stars. And yeah, I want to know what happens next, because at the end, you're just kind of like,
The end was the best.
the end is the best, and it's done, because who knows what happens next? Because, well, Shakespeare's
knows?
pretty dead, so.
You think?
Yeah.
So there's probably not a sequel coming from him.
Probably
so
not.
hopefully Lisa Klein takes the
Step
hint
it up.
and makes a sequel. So Ophelia by Lisa Klein, 4 stars from me, 3.5 from Brandy, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
There are a variety of different awards and nominations for different things, and one of the greatest programs right now is called Read for a Lifetime, and it's a high school program that's sponsored by the state to help high schoolers read. And when they do succeed, it's a great thing they can put on their college applications. One of the books on this list this year is called How to Build a House by Dana Reinhardt. In this story, we follow the summer of Harper, who has left her family at home with a mess of trouble. Her father's getting divorced, and she has to start her whole life all over again at the age of 17. And we follow her on her trip to Tennessee to help a variety of Habitat for Humanity to help build a house for a family that was a victim of a tornado. While she's there, she finds new friendships and meets a new boy named Teddy. And she learns the importance of being honest with herself and being honest with others. Check this one out today, How to Build a House. Welcome back. Our second novel that we are discussing today is called Secondhand by Michael Zadoorian. Richard owns a secondhand store called Satori Junk outside of Detroit. He's the kind of guy for whom not much happens, until it all happens at once. His mother dies, and Richard rummages through his parents' basement for good junk and finds a few good things that will change his life and his view on everything. To help him along on his transformation, he meets Teresa, a fellow hipster and thrift store junkie who shares his feelings about junk, and he falls for her hard.
Bowling shirts and poodle planters. Today I open up and a few people straggle in. About 1:30, one hipster buys an old bowling shirt that I picked up at a Value Village. I must say, it is an extremely cool shirt. White with turquoise sleeves and original King Richard sanforized for your protection. The best part is the back of the shirt. Embroidered in red script, it says Bolero Lanes. According to the name over the breast pocket, the previous owner of the shirt was Pete. Strange thing, but hipsters will really pay for a shirt with a name embroidered on it. The older and goofier the name, the better. Herb, Sid, Marvin, better yet, a kooky nickname. Bud, Dot, Buzz. Man, nothing sells like quotation marks. The only other thing that happens is a gone chick in 40s glamour shades looks in my front window. Definitely a potential customer and, well, kind of attractive in a wan beat girl way. I wave for her to come in. This sort of extroversion is against my character, but as a merchant, when someone looks in your store window, you're under obligation to get them to come in. Still, this hardly ever works for me. I think I have wrong or something. People usually just kind of wave back, then clear out. Then this woman actually heads for from the door. As she walks in, she props her glasses up on her head and looks at me. Secondhand. But first, must say, takes place in Detroit, where I'm from. So that gave me a slightly different perspective on this book. I will say that it is very true to Detroit. You can tell that the author grew up there. He writes about streets and places that I definitely know, and it was kind of that recognition. Like if you were reading a book and saw your high school's name in there, you'd be like, ooh,
Like, I
that's
know
my
that
high
place,
school.
yeah.
I know that place. It's just that recognition enjoyment, and that was the biggest enjoyment I got out of the book.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say on that.
I had one enjoyment too.
Okay.
It wasn't Detroit though, because I never lived there. Okay. But I love thrift stores. Mm-hmm. I love shopping at thrift stores. I love the amazing finds you can get at thrift stores. And that's what drew me to this book. I was like, a book about thrift stores, this is great. Unfortunately, when I got to this book about thrift stores, it was full of shallow, whiny, soap opera-esque characters that just made me want to rip my hair out. So
yeah, the characters are pretty thinly drawn. It's not a very deep book, even though the author tries. Like the storyline is his mom dies and he has to go through all of her junk. Now, it's different going through a loved one's junk than it is going to a garage sale or an estate sale and going through a stranger's junk. Then you don't have all the emotional attachment to it. But like one scene that I actually really got a kick out of is he goes to the estate sale for his own mother, finally, and after having all the time in the world to take what he wanted and things like that, he slacks off and he doesn't go and do anything. But he decides, as this woman is about to buy the frying pan that his mother used to cook him breakfast in, he decides he must have this frying pan so much that he's going to steal it from her and run off with it. So like he almost gets into a fist fight with this woman over this stupid frying pan. And it was just a little bit amusing to me. But that's like the extent of it. That was like a chuckle moment. Like,
no, okay.
Next page. Keep going. You
Well,
know.
we should also talk about the relationship between Richard and Teresa. Teresa is that hipster girl that just walked into the store.
She
with
walks
her
into
little
his life with his
shades
sunglasses, you know.
And she is a piece of work.
Yeah, she is.
She is insane. Basically, she literally, like, if she was a real person, she would be in so much therapy and on so much
Yeah.
medication.
Yeah, I agree. She works in an animal shelter, and her whole hang-up, and I don't feel like I'm giving anything away by
No.
telling this. Her whole hang-up is that she works in an animal shelter, and she has to. These animals come in, and people drop them off, and people leave them, and they're leaving them saying, "Oh, you'll find them a good home." She can't find homes for all these animals, and she ends up having to put a lot of them down just because there are no homes for them, and she's torn up by it, and she has nightmares about it, and she can't sleep, and all this other kind of stuff.
And she has how many cats at home?
Because she can't.
She doesn't
bear
want to kill them all, so she has like
right, so she
at
takes a
least
lot of them home.
15, I think.
Right,
I
she's
don't
like
remember.
the crazy cat lady.
She is the crazy cat lady.
But I truly believe that happens to people. I can,
Oh, yeah.
I can empathize with that.
Someone
thought
has to do
of-
it.
Right, exactly. With that thought of being put into that position where you're there because you care about animals, and then you have to do the most horrific thing you can think of to those animals because there's nowhere for them to go. I can empathize with that. She was so over the top dramatic, and it was just like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. She has, a fascination with the Day of the Dead, and she has the skulls and skeletons painted on her bedroom wall.
Yeah.
I don't care. That's creepy.
And she
I get into
collects
the Day of the-
skeletons.
Right. I get into the idea of the Day of the Dead, the whole Mexican day where they celebrate your ancestors, people who have gone before, and things like that. It's not a scary thing. I understand that. I get into that. in your bedroom painted on the wall, that's a little freaky. I don't care, you know? And there's other things, like she, wakes up crying and
She won't let anyone stay at the house because she gets scared and she'll kill them or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I just...
It was unbelievable, and it did not have me entranced. It had me rolling my eyes the entire time.
For a novel that is supposed to be, viewed as more of a realistic fiction, it was so fantasy.
It was way more fantasy than Ophelia or any other Jennifer Government, any other book we've done. This was definitely more fantasy than that.
But
so,
on that note, I have to say, I gave it 1.5 stars, and only gave him that half star because of the awesome thrift store references. And that's it. That's the only reason.
And I gave the book 1 star, and that extra half star was for the awesome Detroit references. So we're pretty much on the same page.
We're brutal today. But
yeah, 1 star from me, 1.5 from Brandy. Those extra half stars just tossed in. So we'll see you in a few minutes.
Every once in a while, it's important to take special time and think back on classics. Books you may had to have read for high school, or maybe never got a chance to read in high school. Or maybe you're in high school and you have to read this for a class. The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams is a short play, but full of emotion, circumstances, and characters that are so real and true to life that it's hard to put down. You follow the story of Tom, who lives with his mother and his sister, who has a handicap. In this story, freedom is an important theme, whether it's Tom looking for freedom from the situation his father left him in by leaving home and leaving him in charge of his mom or his sister. Freedom, in Amanda's case, the mother, trying to escape her aging time and go back to a time when she was free to do what she wanted. Or Laura, whose freedom is harder to break, freedom from the handicap that keeps her at home and away from enjoying things of life. Check out Tennessee Williams' Glass Menagerie today and take a blast from the past. Every year, a committee by the state comes up with a list of nominees called the Rebecca Caudles. This list of books is important because grades 6 through 8 get to vote on their favorite book, and that book is the one that wins the award, not a committee chosen by adults. One of the books on this 2010 list is called First Light by Rebecca Steed. This book is a science fiction novel in which Peter travels to Greenland with his parents to do some researching about global warming and how the ice caps are doing. What he doesn't understand is that beneath his feet while he is out there is an entire civilization of people living in the ice. Thea, one of these people, has ambitions to find a way out of her ice-engulfed home in order to see what's out there in the real world. When these two meet, their worlds collide, and a bunch of drama, action, adventure, and emotions pour out of every angle. Check out First Light today.
Welcome back. For our third and final novel today, we have a book called China Dolls by Michelle Yu and Blossom Khan. China Dolls follows the lives of 3 professional Asian American women trying to juggle their careers and their culture. MJ is a sports writer trying to find her place in the white male world of sports. Alex is an attorney attempting to shed her quiet Asian stereotype. Lynn is a stockbroker set to live a fulfilled, risk-filled life. On top of all that, they have to struggle with finding that special someone and the terror of introducing that special someone to their family.
All right. Here we go. Excuse me. Lynn and MJ both turned to see a Wall Street young Turk type grinning at them. He was a typical broker, decked out in an expensive Hugo Boss suit, silk tie, and gleaming Rolex. In short, he was everything Lynn loved in a guy. Sure enough, Lynn went straight into flirt mode. Well, why, hello there, she said brightly. Were you talking to us? I most certainly was. He flashed a gleaming smile at her. I was wondering if you could help me translate some Chinese characters on these soaps for me. Oh, of course, Lynn batted her eyelashes at him. I'd love to. Great, he extended a hand. I'm Will, by the way. Lynn shook his hand. I'm Lynn. And then, as if remembering MJ, she quickly gestured toward her friend. And this is MJ. MJ waved. Will smiled at her politely, but he clearly wasn't interested in the jeans-wearing, ponytailed Asian girl in t-shirt and sneakers. Apparently, she wasn't the kind of Chinese wear he was shopping for. To her surprise, MJ realized that feeling was mutual.
First of all, we must mention the awesome cover of the book China Dolls. It's what drew us.
Yeah,
Such a cool
we saw
cover.
this on the shelf and we're like, this is amazing. Why aren't we reading this one right now?
We must do this.
And we
which
did.
is what we did.
And
And
we're disappointed.
And I'm not either. China Dolls was a very good novel. It is chick lit, so it's sort of romance. It's sort of, you know, power to the girls kind of thing, but it's not insipid
not
like
flighty.
it could be. Right? It's not flighty and bubbly and like so many chick lit stories are.
Powerful and
Right.
yeah, girls with good jobs. And
Exactly, exactly. And although they are hung up sort of on finding that guy, they that's a part of every woman's life. Even when you say you're not, you're always kind of looking. you
And
know?
at the same time, it's their families pressuring them a lot to
Right.
find that guy. And more importantly, that Chinese guy.
Right. Which this book is very heavy on interracial relationships and the struggles within them, because in their worlds, in the worlds that they work in, there are a lot of white males, and a lot of the white males are attracted to them, you know, and that's just who your circles are, and you fall in love with whoever you fall in love with. So that's not at all an issue for them, but for their parents' generation, it's like, oh, she's fallen from grace or whatever, you know. So they have to deal with that as well. And the three different girls, there's three different stories, you know, all tied in together sort of. It's one story arc, and each one has their main part
It's kind
of
of
it.
like divided into like, if it were a play like acts.
Right.
It's like, you know, there's MJ's story, and then it goes to, I want to say, Lynn's story, and then it goes to Alex's story. And the best part, which I just found so amusing, is at the beginning of every single little like character, they have something to represents their job.
Right.
And then, for instance, for MJ's story, it's all divided into quarters. There's like first quarter, second quarter. And
Because she's the
a
sports writer.
And I
Exactly.
just thought that little quirk in
That
there,
little
I was like,
touch.
oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, it was very cute. Now, the authors, there are two authors and three characters.
Yeah.
One of the authors is a sports writer, and one of the authors is an attorney. And those two storylines definitely read the strongest,
Yeah.
you know, because they have so much personal experience they can throw into there. The third character is good, but
Yeah,
it's just
it's-
definitely not as strong as the others. One thing I definitely find interesting, not in a bad way, not in a good way, just interesting, is the fact that two of the three characters do end up in an interracial relationship. The third character, who does end up with a Chinese man, the Chinese men are not very well drawn. They are background characters. It's all, and the one that she ends up with, who, you know, I kind of knew, you know,
Yeah, it's
early on
one
that
of
it was going to
those.
happen. But I wanted to know more about him. He did seem like an interesting person, but you couldn't really tell because they didn't go in too deeply. And I always find it interesting when someone in an interracial relationship, not that I know that about these authors, I don't know
Yeah.
that. But when someone that's in an interracial relationship does not acknowledge the opposite sex of their own race in a certain way, it's just an interesting thing to look at when you're reading the novel.
It's one of those things where you're obviously biased about your own culture. You know
Exactly.
it better than anyone else, and so you're not going to give an outside point of view. You're going to give what you know. And
Right.
if all that these two women, you know, not judging, but if all that these two women knew were this kind of, you know, quiet, introverted,
Or else very judgmental.
or judgmental,
Because that was
Chinese
the two
men,
extremes.
right? Then that's all they're going to write about, and I'm sure that there's
Plenty of
plenty
them.
of them that don't fit into those
Exactly.
two cookie cutters. But you know, it's a bias thing, and
Right.
but you can't not be biased in something when you're
Exactly.
writing about your
you have
own
to
life.
have an opinion, and that's the opinion
So-
that they show through this book anyway. But regardless of any socio whatever ideas,
We'll put that up-
political
put that on the
whatever,
shelf.
that's all on the shelf. Exactly, because it's a good book.
Yes.
It's very entertaining. It was fun to read. MJ was my favorite character. The
Me
sports
too.
writer was my
Oh,
favorite.
I loved
She
her.
was just feisty.
And
you know.
her man, which I'm not gonna say anything about him, except that I really liked him.
He was your type.
He
I
my
was
type of
reading the
guy.
book thinking Brandy loves this man. I really was. I really and truly was. Another thing, the worlds of the women was pretty well thought out, I
Yes.
thought. Like their jobs were explained pretty well, and you got interested, and you hoped they got the position that they wanted. Again, specifically MJ, because she's the one that we both liked so
Right.
much. It was interesting to see, especially being black. You know, you hear a lot about, oh, it's, you know, affirmative action is needed to, you know, to help equalize sometimes in different places. But you never hear about, what about all the other minorities, you
Yeah.
know? It's tough for everybody, really, you know. Asian Americans, Native Americans, you know, Mexican Americans, whoever, you know, it's tough to be in an environment where you are the only one who is like you. You're the only one who has the same background as you. You don't necessarily have those same lunchtime conversations because you
Right.
don't necessarily watch the same TV shows or have the same background or whatever, you know. And it's interesting to read a book from yet another culture's point of view and say, yeah, I know what that feels like. I know exactly what she's talking about, you know.
And they both go so into depth with the Chinese culture that it's you don't really know much about. Like I didn't know anything about the culture of how their families work, and there's a whole bunch of little, I don't want to say idiosyncrasies, but you know, little things that they believe that you wouldn't know unless you
Right.
specifically sat down with someone of, you know, of a Chinese ethnicity and, you know, spoke to them directly about, well, what does this mean to you?
Right.
And it was very informative, besides
being entertaining, exactly.
So-
on the whole, China Dolls, I gave it 3.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I had nothing really bad to say about it, other than certain characters were a little bit thin for me, but that didn't stop me from enjoying it at all.
I gave it 3 stars. You know, I'm always a harder critic.
I
But
know.
no, I really loved this one. I really did. So yeah, hope you guys check it out.
All right.
So, do a recap.
Let's do a recap. First, we had Ophelia by Lisa Klein. I gave it 4 stars. Brandy gave it 3.5.
Then we had Secondhand by Michael Zadoorian. Kelly gave it 1 star, and I gave it 1.5.
And China Dolls by Michelle Yu and Blossom Khan. I gave it 3.5 stars. Brandy gave it 3. So again, thanks a lot for joining us over here on Hardcover Feedback. Remember, every book that we read can be found at your library or at a bookstore or somewhere else. You can find it. It's easy. There's the internet nowadays. So until we see you next time, keep reading, and we will see you later.